Well, this week we got a glimpse at the fundraising prowess of the candidates who are seeking office this fall, or lack thereof. Andrew Cuomo hit the campaign trail in an RV with his 3 daughters in tow, and one AG wannabe had some explaining to do after a staffer struck a parked car and then took off. A very busy news week, especially considering it's actually mid-July and the legislature isn't even here. Joining me to break down all the latest political headlines are the reporters who spent the week writing them. Joining us tonight, we have Ken Lovett. He is the Capitol Bureau Chief for the New York Daily News. Jimmy Vielkin, he is a political reporter and blogger for the Albany Times Union. I just gave you a raise. And Fred Dicker is the state editor for the New York Post, also host of the radio show Live from the Capitol with Fred Dicker on Albany Station Talk 1300. Gentlemen, thanks very much for your time. I appreciate it. Thanks for coming. So you want to kick us off with just the basics, and then Jimmy, and then we'll go from there?
We'll let Fred and Ken jump in. Well,
the
big number today was Rick Lazio, and it was quite a thought. He couldn't break $2 million with the money he raised, that he put in $200,000 of his personal money at the very last minute. So he has about $670,000 on hand, which is a little bit more than the $637,000 he had on hand in January. But again, without that loan, it shows that he's bleeding cash, and he's bleeding cash fast. Which is interesting because he's not spending money on advertisements, which polls show he needs to do to get his numbers up in terms of his recognition and his standing vis-a-vis Cuomo. I think he's still about 40 points behind the Democratic candidate. And so he's kind of blowing his money on consultants and staffers.
Yeah, it's not only that, it's that he has this message of fiscal conservatism. It's like, you know, state government spends too much, I'm going to rein them in, and he can't even keep his own spending under control.
It is extraordinary, Liz. I mean, it's a disastrous showing for Rick Lazio, and a lot of people were not only amazed by how poor it was, but they were thinking about Carl Palladino and his signatures that he submitted, 28,000 apparently pretty good Republican signatures. If he's on the ballot, Palladino pledging to spend up to $10 million against the guy who's got $670,000 or $80,000 right now, it's very possible that Rick Lazio is going to get buried in the primary. And how humiliating will that be for the Republican Party? Not to mention the other implications, including the possible death knell for the Conservative Party.
It would be like a Herb London all over again, wouldn't it? I mean, did you cover that? Or you covered that
race?
Yes, I did. For sure.
Except Herb London ran on a third party, a Conservative Party, and almost beat the Republican. In this case, you'd have Herb London equivalent beating the Pierre Renfrey character back in 1990 and grabbing the Republican nomination away from the Republicans.
But could they actually get Rick Lazio off the Conservative line?
Well, he'd have to become a judge. He'd have to get nominated to a judgeship, and that was the joke.
But they may not have to. Even if they don't get him off, that's why the party would die.
Right.
I mean, unless he got off. You're right. They would try to get him off, but if they couldn't get him off, that could be the end of the party, which was founded in the early 1960s.
And the last time we saw a death of a party was the Liberal Party. It was in 2002 at the hands of Andrew Cuomo.
I mean, 680,000, and you've got a primary in front of you. You know, he wanted to challenge these petitions. You know, where's that money going to come from on Palladino?
And, the Republicans,
and then you've got a guy, a general candidate in Cuomo who's got $24 million.
3.6.
Just for a little historical memory, which I think is really important on this one. Some of the Lazio people are saying, well, Andrew Cuomo is an attorney general, he's an incumbent, he's got all this access. Back in 1994, when George Pataki was a mere freshman state senator running against Mario Cuomo, he raised more money than Cuomo did, and Cuomo was the incumbent governor. So merely because you're an incumbent doesn't guarantee you a lot of money.
Okay, yeah, but that's a different situation altogether. I mean, it wasn't anybody but Cuomo year that year.
And this year, it seems to be anybody. Everybody wants Cuomo.
That's right.
Look, and this really, you know, let's not forget that the state party chair, Ed Cox, killed this guy because he tried to push, you know, try to push Steve Levy onto the ballot. That hurt fundraising. There's no doubt about that. That donors were just, you know, if the state chair did
Cox
not...
has that much influence. I mean, Cox may have been doing it because he realized Lazio just couldn't be a good candidate.
But if you're a donor or a potential donor, why would you give to Lazio? You know, his own party chair didn't want him. There's no enthusiasm for him out there.
That's the key, I think.
I think also, no, come on, Jimmy. You look like you're watching a tennis match. I mean, I think that the funny thing also is that not only did Ed Cox push him out and maybe arguably really put the kibosh on his fundraising, Ed Cox couldn't raise any of his own money.
That's the funny thing. His big vaunted event, this dinner where he brought in Jeb Bush, he called in a personal favor to get him to come to Manhattan on the night of the convention. It fell short of the $1 million expectations, and the party reported it didn't have much in its accounts. I think it's a total of $1.56 million to spend, and that's between the federal races, the housekeeping account, and just general operations. So it's really they don't have a lot of money to throw around. They have enough money to keep the party going, but they keep talking about this support function that they're going to be playing, and it doesn't seem that they're going to have anything to do with it.
And the amazing thing is, truly, is that given what's gone on in Albany the last 4 years with the Democrats, between Spitzer and the Patterson problems and the craziness in the Senate and everything that's gone on, the Republicans just have nothing to win. If they can't win in a year like this, I don't know how they'll ever
But
come back.
look at, did you see the state Democratic Party numbers? I mean, the state Democratic Party can't raise money either. In fact, they didn't raise much more money than the Republicans did. And this is supposed to be, do you remember Elliot Spitzer and what he did for the Democratic Party? I mean, he used it as a pass-through to help take over the Senate. And then this time around, you're looking at a state Democratic Party. Why does he need that? He doesn't need it. He's got $23 million of his own money.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, why bother? Cuomo has $23.6 million. He can spend it as he sees fit. I wouldn't be surprised if over the summer he doles it out to candidates of his choosing, either insurgents or incumbents who are going to sign on to his agenda, and make it very clear who stands with him, who doesn't stand with him. He doesn't need to deal with the party infrastructure. He has his guy, Charlie King, who's running the party as the executive director, and presumably at some point he will think about a new chairman. Jay Jacobs, the current state chairman, was a Patterson ally who, granted, has worked well with Cuomo, but
gave him $10,000.
Right, and there's no reason to build up the Democratic Party. Not just Cuomo raising the money, but there are 5 Democratic Attorney General candidates, all of whom have raised probably about $5 million between them. So the money to Democrats is out there. Whereas Republicans, I don't think you can make the same argument. Those that do have money in the bank largely have it because they're spending their own money. Harry Wilson, probably one of the best hopes for the Republican Party running against Tom DiNapoli, put in $2.3 million of his own money to his campaign.
Before we get there, let me just add, Fred, do you think that Andrew Cuomo would actually give money to candidates of his own choosing, legislative candidates? Because today we saw him, or rather yesterday, he kicked off this RV tour, which we'll get to later, but he used this very strong message. He said something along the lines of, if you're not signing on with my 5-point reform pledges, you're not going to be an Albany politician for long. Right. Would he go that far? Because that's like a declaration of war.
It is. I don't think he would, Liz. Yesterday it was interesting because I think he had the Putnam County executive endorsing him, a Republican.
He did.
Very
and
interesting.
The Carmel supervisor.
Yeah, and I think he wants to be seen as bipartisan. I don't think necessarily a few bucks from him, $5,000, $10,000, would turn a race. So I don't know that he would do it unless he could really make a difference. If you're going to do it, you got to win. And it's not clear that the Democrats generally are going to be opposing his platform. Speaker Silver and some of the leadership, I think, are uncomfortable with it. But it remains to be seen. I think he's going to focus mainly on his own race, not try to take on the legislature until next year, assuming he's governor.
So go back to Wilson for a second, because that is very interesting. If DiNapoli came out with 1 and change, right? What was the number? Do you have it?
I do. It's he's got raised about $1.79 million. He raised about $1 million and has about $1.8 million in his bank account. Harry Wilson has about $2.7 million on hand, but $2.3 million of that was his own money.
Right.
And we found out as he released his tax returns about previous years that he was making $5 million plus for a few years within the last 5. So Harry Wilson has a lot of money, and he's demonstrated a big willingness to put it into this race. And in this race particularly, no one knows what the comptroller does. Name ID is everything.
Yeah, 85% of the people in New York don't know who he is, according to the CNN.
But if the Republicans don't have anyone at the top of the candidate that's going to draw people out, that's going to hurt Wilson, because who's going to come out of the Democrats who are going to vote down the line?
But at the same time, Cuomo has shown no willingness to support DiNapoli. In fact, he's shown quite the opposite. He poo-poos him at every turn.
Alan Hevesi got 57% of the vote a couple of years ago. He was under investigation, and Elliot Spitzer had walked away from him.
He was an established name who had been city controller. I guarantee on Election Day, a prediction here, that the Daily News, the New York Post, the New York Times are all going to be endorsing Harry Wilson.
I agree.
And a lot of voters may just look at that. Plus, the mood out there is obviously one of really unhappiness by voters. And that old saw, and it used to be accepted wisdom, that New Yorkers like to have a controller from the opposite party may come into play here. It's a pretty good argument. If you're going to have a Democratic governor, why not have a Republican to keep an eye on?
The last time we had a Republican controller was Ned Reagan. And that's a while ago. I agree with you. I think that the establishment is going to go for Harry Wilson, but I'll be surprised. It's going to be a wash, and it's going to turn out. It's going to all come down to turnout.
That's what I'm saying.
Let's talk, though, about that AG race.
Just on turnout, if I could just say, the energy right now, I think we'd all agree, is largely on the right of the political